The emergency lighting was the color of dying stars. Red. Deep, arterial red, flooding the corridors of Blacksite Kethara and turning white ceramic walls into something that looked disturbingly alive. For 11 years, Warden Thessaly Vorket had ruled one of the most secure prisons in the Galactic Union. She had survived riots, assassination attempts, a containment breach that had cost her an eye. She had imprisoned war criminals, extremists, military commanders, and being so dangerous that entire star systems preferred to pretend they didn't exist. None of them frightened her, because every threat in Blacksite Kethara was understood, catalogued, contained, except one, Prisoner 7, the human from the death world. For 43 days he had done absolutely nothing. No complaints, no violence, no escape attempts. He ate his meals, sat quietly in his cell, and watched. The staff found that far more unsettling than aggression, because experience had taught them a simple rule. The most dangerous prisoners were never the loud ones. They were the ones who could wait. Then the reactor began to fail. Emergency alarms screamed through the station. The lights turned red, and Warden Vorket realized something that sent a chill through her blood. Prisoner 7's restraints had been inactive for over 4 hours. His cell was no longer secure. He had been free the entire time, and nobody had noticed. At that exact moment, Blacksite Kethara had 33 minutes left to live. Blacksite Kethara does not appear on any commercial navigation chart. This is intentional. It occupies a stable gravitational pocket between two dead moons orbiting a gas giant the Galactic Union's cartographers catalogued as KX 7741 and subsequently stopped thinking about. The station itself is a brutalist monument to containment, 3 concentric rings of reinforced durasteel alloy, inner walls lined with ceramic composite engineered by the Lockheed Vega Corporation to absorb and disperse energy weapon discharge. The outer hull is pocked and scarred from decades of micro-impact events, giving the station the texture of something ancient and indifferent, like a skull left too long in the weather. It holds between 40 and 60 of the Galactic Union's most dangerous individuals. Not the most violent. Violence was common, boring even. 41 known spacefaring species produced violence with the casual regularity of a biological function, and most of it was manageable with the right restraints, the right pharmaceutical protocols, the right ratios. No, Kethara held the dangerous ones. The ones who were dangerous the way a pressure vessel is dangerous, not because of what they're doing, but because of what they contain. The thinkers, the architects, the ones who had demonstrated through catastrophic proof that left to their own devices, they would reshape things in ways the Union could not permit. Vorket understood this distinction with the bone-deep clarity of someone who had enforced it for over a decade, which was why, on the morning of Kethara Incident Day 1, she was standing in the observation gallery above Cell Block Viridian, watching her newest acquisition eat breakfast. Prisoner 7 had been at Kethara for 43 standard days. He ate the same way every morning, seated at the cell's single table, spine straight, both hands visible, working through the nutrient ration with a systematic efficiency that Vorket found simultaneously reassuring and deeply unsettling. He never rushed. He never wasted motion. He consumed exactly what was provided and then sat quietly, and the quality of that quiet was different from other prisoners. Other prisoners were quiet because they were beaten or sedated or plotting. Prisoner 7 was quiet the way a mountain is quiet. The way something is quiet when it has decided, for reasons entirely its own, that noise would be beneath it. His file described him as Marcus Chen, former technical specialist, Earth Colonial Authority, detained following the Viridian Station incident, in which 17 Union security personnel had been incapacitated without a single fatality. A tactical outcome so precise and so paradoxically restrained that the Union's Criminal Intelligence Division had spent 3 months arguing about whether it constituted a provocation or a mercy before ultimately deciding it was both. Which was worse? His formal charge was coordinated interference with Union security operations. Minimum detention, 12 standard years. What the charge did not say, what no official document said, because the Union's legal framework had no adequate language for it, was that Marcus Chen had interfered because 42 civilian colonists, 11 of them children, were about to board a transport with a structural failure in its life support matrix that the security personnel had been too undertrained and too rushed to notice. He had stopped them, efficiently, without killing anyone, and then he had sat down on the docking bay floor and waited for backup to arrive. Vorket had read his file 4 times. She still wasn't sure what to do with it. "He's been quiet again," said Subwarden Drex Polian, appearing at her elbow. Drex was Keth-born, gray-skinned and long-limbed, with the slightly translucent quality that his species developed after too many years in low light. "No communications requests. No complaints about the ration. Did you complete the morning restraint verification?" A pause. Half a second longer than it should have been. Vorket turned. Drex's gray skin had gone distinctly paler. The restraint verification for Block Viridian was, the rotation scheduling was adjusted yesterday for the maintenance cycle on the tertiary corridor. The morning verification team was reassigned to Dash. Drex. The magnetic restraints on cell Viridian 7 are currently in passive standby mode. Vorket looked back through the observation glass. Marcus Chen had finished his breakfast, sitting with his hands folded on the table, looking at nothing, utterly still. The restraint bracers on his wrists were dark, not the steady amber pulse of active engagement. Dark. He had been sitting in an unlocked cell with deactivated restraints for, she checked the rotation log, 4 hours and 17 minutes. "He didn't try to leave," Drex said, in the tone of someone reporting a miracle they didn't understand. Vorket studied the human below. "No," she said slowly. "He didn't," as if feeling the weight of observation, which was biologically impossible through one-way composite glass, which made it more unnerving. Marcus Chen looked up, directly at the observation window, and waited. "Get the restraint team down there," Vorket said quietly. Calmly. "Tell them Dash." The lights went red. The sound that preceded the klaxon was not loud. That was what Vorket would remember in the depositions, the inquiry hearings, the 3 separate Union investigative boards that would spend the better part of a standard year picking through what came next. Not the alarm. Not the red wash of emergency lighting flooding every corridor simultaneously. The sound before the sound. A deep, subsonic thrum she felt in her secondary molars rather than heard. A vibration traveling through the station's superstructure like a thought moving through a very large, very slow brain. Then the klaxon. Then the red. Then Kethara's central management system. Perfectly calm. "Attention. Reactor core instability detected in primary power plant. Category 7 cascading failure in progress. Estimated time to critical breach, 41 minutes. All personnel initiate emergency protocol Kethara 9. Prisoner lockdown engaged. Emergency bulkheads activating. Category 7. Vorket had trained for Category 3. In her darkest professional nightmares, she had sketched contingency plans for a Category 5. Category 7 was not a scenario. Category 7 was the end of the station. Chief Engineer Vasai's voice crackled over the emergency channel, stripped raw with controlled panic. "The tertiary coolant line failed during last night's maintenance cycle. We didn't catch it. The backup regulator has a manufacturing defect. The core has been running hot for 6 hours. The cascade has already reached secondary containment. Can you shut it down remotely?" "The remote systems are running on the primary grid, which is already compromised." A tight pause. "The manual shutdown controls are in sublevel 4, behind the emergency bulkheads, which have engaged. My team is trapped behind them." "How many people?" 11. "And Warden, if someone doesn't reach the physical shutdown controls within 33 minutes, the core breaches. A Category 7 overpressure event will dash. I know what it will do." Vorket's voice was the steadiest thing in the room. "What's between me and sublevel 4? 6 emergency bulkheads. And cell block Viridian." Of course it was cell block Viridian. She looked back through the observation window. The red had turned the cell below into something that looked like the interior of a wound. Marcus Chen was still seated at his table, but his head was moving now. Slowly, systematically, quartering the cell, cataloging the changed lighting, the klaxon pitch, the vibration in the floor. Processing. She watched him process. It was like watching someone run a calculation with very high stakes attached to the result. "Drex," she said. "Warden, get me a channel to cell Viridian 7. Drex stared at her. She looked at him with the particular quality of patience that 11 years in this work had built into her bones. "Now, Sub-Warden." The comm panel flickered on. A soft amber indicator light, different from the dead bracers, warmer, and then the warden's voice, filtered by the emergency system. "Prisoner 7. Marcus Chen didn't look at the comm panel. He was studying the ceiling, cross-referencing the klaxon's acoustic profile against the subsonic thrum still reverberating through the long bones of his legs. Good conductors, long bones. He'd learned that in a collapsing tunnel system outside Bogota. Reactor. Definitely reactor. The frequency signature was specific, wrong for structural failure, wrong for external impact. The right kind of wrong for a coolant cascade. He'd worked reactor systems for 11 years before the Union decided his skill set was too inconvenient to leave uncustodied. He knew exactly what this sounded like. He also knew, with a quieter certainty, that the warden was calling because she needed something she couldn't get without him. "I can hear you," he said. "You're aware of the situation. Category 7 cascade. Sublevel 4 is cut off. Your engineers are behind the bulkheads, and you need someone to reach the manual override junction inside Block Viridian." He paused. "Which is why you're talking to the one person who's already inside it." The pause that followed had a texture to it. The texture of someone discarding a prepared script and deciding to be honest instead. The manual control junction at the far end of the block. It would open the corridor to sublevel 4. "But I can't get into the block without triggering full prisoner egress, and I can't dash. You can't risk 41 prisoners loose in a dying station." He finally looked at the comm panel. "But I'm already in here, with deactivated restraints." "Yes, and you're asking me to reach that panel. I'm telling you the situation." Her voice carried something disciplined in it, not quite vulnerability, but the shape that honesty makes when it's being held by a very controlled person. "What you do with it is your decision." Marcus stood up. He stood the way people stand when a world of 1.0 gravity has spent a lifetime teaching their body what standing costs, with a groundedness, a settled solidity, a relationship with every surface beneath him that beings from lighter worlds simply didn't carry. His bones were denser. His resting cardiovascular output would have registered as moderate exertion on any alien scanner in the facility. He moved to the cell door like something that had been waiting for permission to begin. "Warden," he said. "Yes. I need the cell block roster. Every occupied cell, species profile, detention history." He put one hand flat on the door. "And I need you to trust me with what I find." The longest pause yet. Then the data arrived on his cell panel. He memorized it in 40 seconds. "One more thing," he said. "Yes. How many total people on this station?" 67. Including the 41 prisoners. Marcus was still for a moment. 67 people. The math he didn't need to do because he'd already done it when the lights went red. He thought about 42 colonists on a docking bay. About 11 children who had no idea how close they'd come to not making it home. The door clicked open. The corridor hit him with smell before anything else. Recycled atmosphere, the faint alkaline bite of industrial cleaning compounds, and underneath both hot metal. The specific, acrid smell of a reactor running outside its tolerances. Thin but unmistakable, threading through the filtered air like a warning that had been politely delivered and was about to stop being polite. Marcus stepped into cell block Viridian and stood still for 3 full seconds. The block was a single corridor, 40 meters end to end, cells offset along both sides to prevent cross-communication. Emergency lighting painted everything in red shadow. At the far end, the blast door to sublevel 4, sealed. The override panel was set into the left wall 2 meters before it. 37 meters of corridor. 9 occupied cells. He checked the internal clock he'd been running since the first thrum 31 minutes. He started walking. Cells 1 through 4, manageable. An information broker, 2 political dissidents, a logistics coordinator. Cognitive threats, not physical. He passed them without slowing. Cell 5 stopped him cold. Not because of what he heard. Because of what he didn't. No movement. No sound. No Grex 7 pressed against the door in aggressive display like every instinct in that file said he should be. Just silence. Which was, Marcus understood immediately, significantly more dangerous than noise. He stopped in front of the cell. Read the viewport. And saw nothing because Grex 7 Carathian military operative, documented kill count of 6 Union investigators, rated highly aggressive when unconfined, was standing flat against the wall beside the door, invisible from the corridor angle. Waiting. For the sound of a door opening. "You're on the hinge side," Marcus said, to the apparently empty cell. 3 seconds of absolute silence. Then a sound. The wet, clicking vocalization his translation node rendered as something between amusement and recalibration. The sound of an ambush predator acknowledging that the prey had found it. "The soft skin hears," said Grex 7. The voice was low and layered, each syllable carrying harmonic undertones the translation node struggled with. "The soft skin has good ears. The soft skin has read your file," Marcus said. 6 kills, all investigative personnel. All in the first moments of engagement. You favor ambush over confrontation. He kept his voice completely level. Because confrontation gives the other person time to make decisions. A long pause. What does the soft skin want? The same thing you want. To not die on a failing station in the next 30 minutes. Marcus didn't move from his position. Not closer to the door, not farther. Exactly the distance that said I see you and I'm not afraid of what I see. The reactor cascade goes critical in just under 30 minutes. I'm going to the override panel at the end of this corridor. I'm going to open the bulkhead. Engineers come through. Shut down the reactor. Station survives. And Grex's door stays closed. The clicking sound returned. Louder this time. More harmonic layers. His translation node flagged it as dominance challenge, high intensity, and Marcus felt, in the fine hairs on his forearms, the particular animal awareness that his species had developed over 100,000 years of being small things in a world of large, hungry ones. "The soft skin walks this corridor," Grex 7 said very quietly, "and Grex cannot allow that. Grex has arrangements with the Warden's watch schedule. The soft skin disrupts arrangements." "What arrangements?" "Information. From cell to cell. The soft skin's presence in this corridor unplanned, unscheduled, exposes the network. Exposes Grex." Marcus felt the calculation click into place. Grex 7 wasn't just aggressive. He was running something. A communications network between prisoners, carefully built over months, dependent on the Warden's staff never knowing what passed between cells. Marcus walking this corridor freely, visible, documented, reported, collapsed that network. Grex had been quiet because he was deciding whether killing Marcus before he reached the panel was worth the cost. The answer in that file was almost certainly yes. "Here's what I know about Carathian military training," Marcus said, and his voice stayed very calm, very quiet, with the specific quality of someone stating technical facts. "Ambush entry through a door hinge. 3-point strike pattern to the cervical structure. Designed for a target who's facing away, or surprised, or slow." He paused. "I'm not facing away. I'm not surprised. And I'm from a world where everything moves faster than it does here." The silence stretched. "If you open that door," Marcus said, "you'll find out what happens when something that evolved under 1.0 gravity hits a Carathian in a low-G corridor. and you'll find out in the next 4 seconds. And then you'll be the reason 67 people die. A beat. Or you tell me about your network. Right now. Which cells, which prisoners, what they know. Because if I'm walking this block, I should know what's in it. The silence was the longest yet. Then, with a quality that the translation node didn't have a category for, something between fury and reluctant respect. Cells 9 and 10 are the problem. Not Grex. Marcus waited. The Veth pair in 10 have been working the ventilation coupling since the alarm started. They want the corridor junction, not for the panel, for the escape pod access point. They reach that junction, they're gone. 17 prisoners left behind with no pod access. Clicking pause. Grex does not escape alone. Grex's arrangements depend on everyone remaining. Why are you telling me this? Because you already knew about the ambush. And you're still standing there. The clicking sound took on a different register, lower, more resonant. In Carathian military culture, the soldier who stands in the open in front of a known threat position is either a fool dash, or someone who's decided the threat isn't as dangerous as the alternative. Marcus finished. A very long silence. Grex will remain in his cell, said Grex 7. The harmonic layers in his voice had changed. The soft skin should move quickly. Marcus moved. Cells 6 and 7 were empty. Cell 8 made him stop. The life sign indicator was active. Inside, low, rhythmic keening. His translation node flagged it as distress vocalization, non-linguistic, and Marcus cross-referenced his memorized roster. Cell 8, Preth species juvenile. 17 standard years. Detention reason. Present at location during arrest of parental unit. Pending transfer to juvenile processing facility. 2 months. She had been here for 2 months, in a maximum security block, pending an administrative transfer that no one had apparently found time to action. The keening shifted pitch when the station groaned, a deep, structural sound rolling through the composite walls as the reactor's thermal output climbed. The child's vocalization spiked into something higher, more ragged. The sound of a young being who didn't understand what was happening, but understood with the full clarity of instinct that something very large was very wrong. Marcus checked his timer. 24 minutes. The Veth pair were in cell 10. The panel was still 20 meters away. He opened the cell. The being inside was small, barely reaching his chest, covered in the overlapping scale plates that Preth species developed in early maturity, currently pulled so tight against her body that she looked like something that had closed around itself trying to disappear. For eyes fixed on him the moment the door opened, wide and ringed with the pale discharge that his memory flagged as Preth's stress response. She pressed harder against the wall. Marcus crouched down to her eye level and stayed there, hands open at his sides. "Hey," he said. Voice low, slow, even the register he'd learned over years of crisis work communicated safety across more species barriers than any translation node had a right to. "Hey, look at my hands." She looked at his hands. "Open," he said. "See? Nothing in them." For eyes tracked between his hands and his face, the rapid threat assessment calculation that every young creature runs when a large unknown appears in its space. "My name is Marcus," he said. "I'm going to fix the lights, but I need you right here, close to me, doing exactly what I say." A pause. "Can you do that?" A long moment. The station groaned again and she flinched, a full-body shudder, the kind that starts in the spine and radiates out, and he watched her fight it down with a determination that was purely recognizably young. Terrified, but deciding to hold on. "Yes," she said. Small as a stone dropped in still water. He stood up and held out his hand. She looked at it. She looked at him. She took it. Her hand in his was light, almost startlingly light, a reminder of just how much gravity differential existed between her biology and his. She weighed perhaps 22 kilograms. On her homeworld, she probably felt entirely substantial. Here, in a facility calibrated for beings twice her mass, she had spent 2 months being small in a place that was too large for her. He felt her grip tighten when the klaxon pulsed a different rhythm, 3 short bursts. The cascade progression warning. 23 minutes. Stay close, he said and moved. He positioned the child against the corridor wall between cells 7 and 8. In the deepest shadow the red lighting created. Right here, he said. No matter what you hear, no matter what happens, you stay here. For eyes very large. I'll come back, he said. She studied him with the particular gravity of a young being deciding whether to believe something difficult. Her scale plates, still tight with fear, shifted slightly, not opening, but the quality of their tension changed. Like something bracing rather than hiding. She let go of his hand. He walked to cell 10. The 2 Veth pattern syndicate operatives had been working the ventilation coupling for 19 minutes, by Grec 7's accounting. Marcus put his palm flat on the corridor wall between cells 9 and 10 and found the structural node, the point where the coupling's resonance was transmitting most cleanly through the composite. He pushed. Not hard. Hard was wrong. Hard cracked composite and accomplished nothing. The correct pressure was measured and precise, applied with the ball of the palm at a specific angle against the resonant frequency. The kind of pressure a human hand generates without thinking, because human hands evolved to manipulate a world that spent millions of years actively resisting. He felt the threads re-engage through his palm like a key finding a lock. The sound from cell 10 stopped. Then, the coupling re-engaged. Second Veth voice, flat with unwilling precision. Something countered the resonance from outside. That's not dash first voice. It's the human. A pause that felt like recalibration. The one from cell 7. He's in the corridor. He's standing in the corridor with his hand on the wall. Yes. A longer silence. Marcus, hand still on the wall, waited. Through the composite he could feel the faint vibration of 2 very fast minds reassessing very quickly. Is it going to let us out? First voice. No, Marcus said. It can hear us. Yes. A pause. You're going to the override panel. Yes. You're going to save the station. Not quite a question. That's the plan. Including us. Including everyone. The silence that followed had a different quality from the ones before it. Marcus had spent enough time around Veth pattern thinkers to recognize the sound of a calculation completing, the specific stillness of an intelligence that has run the numbers and arrived at an answer it wasn't expecting. The secondary lock on the panel junction, said the second Veth voice very carefully. Physical mechanism. You'll need a triangular driver, for 0.2 millimeter, counterclockwise on the retention bolt. Marcus took his hand off the wall. I know. And the 6th lever in the sequence lock runs false. It's a decoy engagement point. If you trigger it before the 4th and 5th, the whole mechanism resets. Marcus stopped. That was not in the emergency systems manual. How do you know that? He said. We've been here 14 months, said the first Veth. We read everything there is to read. A pause with something strange in it, not quite pride, not quite contrition. Lever sequence is 3, 1, 4, 2, 6, 5, 7, 8, 10, 9, 11, 12. Not the printed order. Marcus committed it to memory in the time it took to breathe once. Why? He said. The silence this time was the longest. Because you opened cell 8, said the second Veth voice very quietly. And you're still holding her hand in your head, even though you're standing 20 meters away. A pause. We have young ones too. On our world. Marcus said nothing. He walked to cell 9. The Veresi in cell 9 was already at the door. Dask Mull was enormous, 220 kilograms of evolved threat in the gray-green heavy skin that Veresi developed in mature age. He was pressed against the viewport with what Marcus recognized, from the file and from the specific quality of his stillness, as the posture of someone who had been listening to every word in this corridor and had been running his own calculations the entire time. The Veth pair gave you the lever sequence, Dask Mull said. Statement. Yes. A sound that vibrated the viewport slightly. They never give anything. They have children, Marcus said. The Varesi was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice had that quality Marcus had heard through the wall earlier, the gravel-deep register of something very large making a considered decision. The panel is 20 meters. You have a pause. 21 minutes. The station's thermal expansion has been stressing the track housing on that blast door for the past hour. By the time you get the panel open, the door will bind on the left track. Marcus looked at him. How do you know that? I hear things. I feel things through floors. I've been on 3 stations that went critical. A pause. I've only ever been on one that was saved. What happened on that one? Someone stayed, Dask Mull said simply. Marcus started walking. Human, Dask Mull said behind him. He didn't stop. I've ended lives. A lot of them. I'm not going to tell you I regret it because I don't know if that's true. The gravel voice was very quiet now, directed at Marcus's back. But I know what it looks like when someone goes the wrong direction. And you keep going the right one. Marcus kept walking. He went back for the child on his way. He heard the panel junction before he reached it. The corridor beyond Cell 10 had changed in the 4 minutes since he'd mapped it mentally. The heat from the failing reactor had climbed several degrees, enough to feel on exposed skin, a dry, pervasive warmth that had no source and no shadow, the kind of heat that comes from inside things rather than outside them. The composite walls were actually warm to the touch. His fingers registered it as he moved. The station groaned again, this time longer, this time with a harmonic undertone that hadn't been there before. A lower register, structural rather than mechanical. The sound of a station's skeleton being asked to hold against thermal loads it wasn't built for. The child's hand tightened on his. He looked down. She was looking up at him, all 4 eyes, wide and very steady. The scale plates on her face tight with the effort of not showing how frightened she was. Still okay? He said. She thought about it with complete seriousness. Scared, she said. Me too, he said. She looked surprised. He kept moving. The panel junction was exactly where the layout data had said, and in significantly worse condition than the data suggested. The housing was warm to the touch and a hairline fracture had developed across the lower left corner. The composite material stressed by the same thermal expansion Dask Mull had mentioned. The secondary lock mechanism was intact, but the housing screws had expanded in their fittings, the metal responding to heat with the predictable physics of things not designed to operate outside their rated temperature range. 18 minutes. He positioned the child beside the panel, her back to the wall. Right here. Watch my hands if you need to look at something. She looked at his hands. He opened the panel housing. The secondary lock took 60 seconds rather than the estimated 40. The expanded screws required specific pressure angles to break free without stripping. He felt the first real resistance of the attempt, the moment where the easy approach wasn't working and the improvised approach had to be assessed and selected in real time with a clock running. His thumbnail, edge on, specific angle, sustained pressure. The screw broke free. The internal mechanism was exposed. 12 physical levers, spring-loaded, rated at 40 kilograms of sustained force each. The printed sequence on the adjacent wall plate read 1 through 12 in order. The Veth had told him 3, 1, 4, 2, 6, 5, 7, 8, 10, 9, 11, 12. If they were lying, if this was leverage, if the 14 months of Veth calculation had identified this moment as an opportunity, then triggering the wrong sequence would reset the mechanism and cost him the 3 minutes he didn't have. He thought about the second Veth voice saying, "We have young ones too." He engaged lever 3. Click. Solid. Real. Lever 1. Click. The station made a sound he hadn't heard before. A deep, resonant crack somewhere in the superstructure above them, followed by a cascade of smaller, sounds like a ship settling after heavy weather. The emergency lighting flickered. Not the steady red of controlled emergency power, a stuttering, uneven flicker that lasted 2 full seconds before stabilizing. The child made a small sound. "Still here," Marcus said, without looking up. "Keep watching my hands. Lever 4. Lever 2. He was moving faster now, not rushed, but accelerated, the specific tempo of someone who has found the mechanism's rhythm and is working with it rather than against it. 14 minutes. He reached lever 6, the decoy position. The printed sequence said, engage it here. The Veth had said skip to 5. He went to lever 5. Click. He exhaled. 7. 8. The heat in the corridor had climbed again, noticeably, measurably, the ambient temperature rising with the incremental advance of the cascade. He could feel it on his forearms, the back of his neck. The composite wall beside the panel was hot enough now that the child had shifted away from it without being told. The breath instinct for temperature threat working exactly as it should. Smart kid. 10. 9. His hands were starting to feel the sustained effort of 40 kilograms per lever, not painfully, not yet, but with the kind of accumulated fatigue that builds without announcing itself and then presents the bill all at once. He noted it the way you note weather, a fact about conditions useful for planning, not worth slowing down for. 11. The station made another sound. This one different from all the others. Lower. Longer. The sound of something that has been holding past its limits, deciding at a cellular level that it has held long enough. The corridor lights went out. Full darkness. The emergency system failing over to reserve power, and in the 3-second gap before the backup illumination engaged, the corridor was completely, absolutely, primally dark. The child grabbed his arm. Both hands, scale plates fully open, the grip of something very small and very frightened, finding the one thing in the dark that it trusted. I'm here, he said. Immediately. Without hesitation. I'm right here. Don't let go. She didn't let go. The reserve lighting came on dimmer than the emergency red. A flat amber that turned everything the color of old photographs. Enough to see by. Barely. 12 minutes. Lever 12. The mechanism completed with a sound like a vault unsealing, deep, authoritative, final. A sound that meant yes, this worked, this is real. The blast door at the end of the corridor began to move. Dask Mull had been right about the track housing. The blast door weighed 4,000 kilograms, and it moved on hydraulics running at reduced capacity, and the left track had warped under 6 hours of thermal stress, and the door was binding with every meter of travel, shuddering and fighting, the hydraulic system screaming against resistance it wasn't designed for. At current rate, 9 minutes to full open. He had 11 minutes total remaining. The math didn't work. And behind the door, 11 engineers needed 4 to 6 minutes with the manual shutdown controls after they reached them. He needed that door open in 3 minutes. Marcus looked at it. He looked at the left track, warped at the base, creating a binding point approximately 60 centimeters from the floor. He looked at the gap between the door's leading edge and the track housing 15 centimeters and narrowing. He crouched down to the child. I need you to do something, he said. Her eyes met his. I need you to go to that wall dash, he pointed to the far side of the corridor, opposite the blast door. And sit with your back against it and your knees up. Cover your ears. He held her eyes. Not because it's going to be loud. Because you're small and I need you out of the way so I don't have to think about where you are while I do this. She looked at the door. She looked at him. She was doing the calculation that children do when they sense an adult is about to do something that costs them. Will it hurt? She asked. Probably, he said honestly. Her scale plates shifted, a complex movement he couldn't read precisely, but the translation node flagged the accompanying subsonic as acceptance, reluctant. She went to the wall. She sat down. She covered her ears. She watched him over her knees with 4 steady, frightened, trusting eyes. Marcus turned to the door. What happened next was a negotiation between biology and physics conducted at the limits of both. The blast door weighed 4,000 kilograms. Marcus Chen weighed 86, had been eating reduced-calorie prison rations for 43 days, and was operating on the far side of what Union medical literature classified as safe exertion levels. His shoulder was already strained from the lever sequence. His core temperature had climbed 2 degrees in the ambient heat of the corridor. He put his shoulder against the door. And then his body did what it had learned, over 100,000 years of evolving on a world that never stopped trying to kill its inhabitants, to do when the alternative was death. It committed. The adrenal cascade hit his bloodstream like a detonation. Epinephrine and norepinephrine and cortisol and a dozen compound responses the Union's xenobiologists had documented and never quite understood, because the documentation captured the chemistry but not the decision behind it, the moment when a human body, reading a survival-level threat, stops negotiating with its own limits and simply overrides them. His shoulder lit up. Real pain, significant and immediate, the soft tissue from the lever sequence objecting loudly to a new and greater demand. He categorized it in the trained way, not structural, not joint failure, soft tissue, acceptable, continue, and pushed past it. He pushed. The door moved. It moved faster. 3 centimeters per second faster, then 5. The hydraulic system, sensing the reduction in load resistance at the binding point, found additional capacity and climbed toward its rated output. The track groaned. The door shuddered. The composite walls on either side vibrated with the transmitted force. The heat in the corridor peaked, the reactor cascade reaching its terminal phase, the thermal output radiating through the station's bones like a fever breaking in the wrong direction. Sweat ran down Marcus's jaw and dripped onto the floor, and the floor was hot enough that it dried almost immediately. 8 minutes. He could feel the specific moment when his body's adrenal override began to cost more than it was covering. The point where the chemistry was still running but the physical substrate was starting to present the bill. His legs were shaking, not with effort but with the specific tremor of muscle fiber at sustained maximum output, the biological equivalent of a red line warning. He breathed. He pushed. The door moved, and through the partially open gap, maybe 60 centimeters now, then 80, then a full meter, he heard running footsteps, the golden bioluminescent glow of HFY collar ridges in the amber emergency light, and the sound of 11 engineers who had been standing in a sealed corridor for 40 minutes suddenly having somewhere to go. Chief Engineer Vasai came through first. She was tall, four-armed, bioluminescence running so bright along her collar ridge that it left afterimages. She came through the gap at a run and stopped 3 meters into the corridor and looked at what she had found on the other side. A human. Alone. Shoulder jammed against a 4,000-kilogram blast door. Legs shaking. Blood from a split thumbnail. The secondary lock housing had caught it at some point, running down one hand and dripping from his knuckle. Face composed. She opened her mouth. "Clock is running," Marcus said, and his voice was steady in the way things are steady when steadiness is a decision rather than a condition. "For minutes. Go." She looked at him for one more second. Just one. The look of someone filing something away that they know they'll spend a long time thinking about later. Then she turned and called to her team in rapid HFY, and 11 engineers came through the gap in a stream of bioluminescent gold, filing past Marcus with a speed and focus that was exactly what he'd asked for. They moved past him like water past a stone, like something the stone was holding space for. The last one through was a young technician, barely into maturity by the softness of his collar ridge, who stopped dead when he drew level with Marcus, staring with all 4 primary eyes at the sight of a human being holding a 4,000-kilogram door open with his body. "You pushed the door," the technician said. "Keep moving," Marcus said. "You pushed the dash. Move." The technician moved. Marcus let the door go. The hydraulic retraction cycle took it back toward closed, steadily, inevitably. He didn't fight it. He stepped back, turned away from the door, and stood still for a moment with his eyes closed, taking stock. Shoulder. Significant soft tissue damage. 2 to 3 weeks of proper recovery. Thumbnail. Minor laceration. Currently irrelevant. Legs. The tremor was already fading as the adrenal load reduced, the biology cashing out its overdraft at a manageable rate. Core temperature. Elevated. Uncomfortable. Not dangerous. He had paid the bill. The numbers worked. He opened his eyes. The child was across the corridor, still seated against the wall with her knees up. She had uncovered her ears. She was looking at him with the full four-eye focus that Preth species used when they were examining something that didn't fit any existing category. "Does it always hurt like that?" she asked. "Pretty often," he said. "Why do you do it?" Marcus crossed the corridor and sat down beside her heavily, carefully, the specific controlled descent of someone who has used up the last of something and is now managing what remains. The floor was still warm beneath him. The klaxon was still cycling. 7 minutes left on the countdown and 11 engineers running hard. "Because it needs doing," he said. She considered this with the gravity of someone encountering an idea for the first time that is going to stay with them for a long time after. Her scale plates, he noticed, had relaxed. Not open, she was still frightened, still very much in a dying station in a red-lit corridor. But the tight defensive posture had softened into something that was just itself. A young being, sitting beside something she had decided to trust. She leaned against his uninjured shoulder. He let her. The next 6 minutes were the longest of the crisis. There was nothing to do. Nothing to manage, nothing to fix, no lever sequence to memorize, no door to push. The engineers were either going to reach the controls in time or they weren't. And Marcus had done everything he was capable of doing to make sure they did, and now the station would decide. He sat on the floor of cell block Viridian, the Preth child against his shoulder, and listened to the station die or not die around him. The sounds were not encouraging. The thermal creaking had become something more structural, a series of deep, irregular pops traveling through the walls and floor that his engineering background identified as the composite material at its thermal limit, the internal stresses finding their weakest points and testing them. The emergency lighting flickered twice more. The heat in the corridor plateaued and then, almost imperceptibly, began to climb again. 3 minutes. 2. The station made a sound he hadn't heard before. A sound he hoped he would never hear again. A deep, resonant shriek of metal under impossible stress, traveling the full length of the superstructure from somewhere below them. The station's skeleton announcing that it was done. The child's scale plates slammed tight. "Still here," he said. "Still here," she said back. Very small. And then from cell 5, from behind a locked door, in a voice that had no translation for what it was expressing and therefore expressed it in the raw acoustic register of something speaking without care for how it sounded. "Soft skin." Marcus looked up. Grex 7's voice, filling the corridor. Not a threat display. Not the clicking, layered vocalization of a Carathian operative running a tactical calculation. Something rawer than that. Something that, the translation node rendered haltingly, meant, "Witness this, remember this, tell this." "If the station dies," Grex 7 said, "they will say Kethara failed. They will list the names. They will not list mine. They will not list yours." A pause. The station groaned. "But Grex will know what you did in this corridor. Grex will know." Marcus said nothing. "On Kara Grex 7 said, quieter now. "We tell a story. The warrior who faces the fire so the others can run. We call it dash." His translation node struggled, flagging the term as cultural concept imperfect translation, and rendered it finally as the last warmth. "The one who gives their heat so others don't freeze." The station shrieked again. 1 minute. "I will not tell you I am good," Grex 7 said. "I am not good, but I know what you are. And if we survive this, Grex will say so." 30 seconds. The heat peaked. The klaxon pulsed. A different rhythm. A triple burst that Marcus recognized from the emergency protocol manual as the cascade terminal warning. The point of no return, the last marker before. The lights went white. Not red. White. Full spectrum operational lighting flooding the corridor with a sudden, absolute normalcy that was almost violent after so long in the dark, washing out the shadows, making everything real and present and ordinary in the specific way that proper light does when it returns to places that had given up expecting it. The klaxon stopped mid-pulse. The heat plateaued and then, gradually, incrementally, in the way that large thermal systems release energy, began to recede. The floor stopped vibrating. From somewhere deep in the station's engineering infrastructure, the the sound of systems coming back online, the proper hum of a reactor running at rated capacity, the soft resumption of atmospheric processing, the subtle, pervasive vibration of the gravity plating cycling up to its calibrated output normal, correct, the sound of a station deciding to continue existing. Marcus sat on the floor and breathed. The Preth child's scale plates opened. All the way, fully. The Preth defensive configuration releasing as completely as it had engaged, the biology reading safe through 100 different simultaneous environmental signals and trusting them. She exhaled a sound that his translation node rendered simply as relief, a concept, apparently, that translated without difficulty across species. She looked up at him. "You did it," she said. "The engineers did it," he said. "You made the door," she said, with the precision of a child who has been paying close attention and intends to be accurate. "And then the engineers did it." He looked at her. "Both," he said. She seemed satisfied with that. From cell 5, silence. Then, barely audible, the wet clicking of Carathian vocalization in a register the translation node flagged as private expression, not intended for external communication. He didn't translate it. Some things didn't need to be. Vorket arrived in cell block Viridian 11 minutes after power restoration, with Subwarden Drex and 4 security personnel. She had come personally, not sent anyone ahead. She stopped when she saw him. He was sitting on the corridor floor, back against the wall, with a small Preth child asleep against his uninjured shoulder. The child had crashed with the completeness of very young beings at the far end of sustained fear, one moment alert, the next profoundly, vulnerably unconscious, trusting the thing next to her the way a child trusts what said it would come back and did. Vorket looked at the sleeping child. She looked at Marcus. She looked at the corridor undamaged, all cell doors intact and correctly closed, no signs of violence, no evidence of the catastrophic prisoner release event that she had, in her most pragmatic moments during the last 40 minutes, calculated as the near-certain outcome of leaving a block containing a Carathian military operative, a Varesi enforcer, and 2 Veth syndicate operatives with a single unrestrained human. Then she looked at his hands. The split thumbnail. The blood, dried brown now against his skin. The soft tissue damage visible in the set of his shoulder, the way he held it slightly lower than the other, with the controlled stillness of someone who has decided not to favor it because favoring it would mean acknowledging it. "Your hands," she said. "They work," he said. "You pushed the door. The hydraulics weren't going to get it open in time." Vorket moved into the corridor properly, Subwarden Drex close behind, the security personnel fanning into standard positions, and then stopping one by one, as they completed their sweep and found a cell block that had every reason to be chaos and was, instead, just a corridor with a man sitting on the floor. One of the security officers, young, heathery, bioluminescence running faint at the collar ridge in the way that indicated a species-specific shock response, stared at the closed door to cell 9. "The Varesi," she said, almost to herself. "He's just Dash." "He's in his cell," Marcus said. "We should verify Dash." "He's in his cell," Marcus said again, with a quietness that closed the subject. The security officer looked at her warden. Vorket looked at Marcus. "You could have gone through the door," she said. "When it opened, you had deactivated restraints, a Category 7 cascade for cover, and every ability to be gone before anyone knew which direction." "Yes. And you stayed. You have a child in here," he said. "In a maximum security block. 2 months. No adjudication. Administrative backlog." He met her eyes, all 3, the 2 primary and the prosthetic with its slightly different focal quality. "That needs to change." Vorket was quiet. "The Varesi in 9 helped," Marcus said. "Provided information about the track housing, about the prisoners in 10. Without it, I'd have burned 2 minutes figuring out what he told me in 30 seconds. He paused. "And the Veth pair in 10 gave me the correct lever sequence for the panel. The 6th position is a decoy. I would have reset the mechanism and lost the time I didn't have." Vorket's expression shifted in a way that was small and significant, The look of someone learning that a system they thought they understood had information in it they hadn't known about. They gave you dash. They have children, Marcus said simply. On their world. Vorket looked at the closed door to cell 10 for a long moment. Then back at him. Why? She said. Not accusatory. The genuine question. You had cover, capability, motive. A Category 7 cascade leaves almost no forensic evidence. An intelligent man could have been through that door and clear of this station's jurisdiction before the power restored. She paused. Why didn't you go? Marcus was quiet. Outside, in the station's restored hum, he could hear the sound of the engineering team securing the reactor systems, the ordinary noise of a crisis resolved and continuity reasserting itself. 67 beings beginning the process of getting on with things. Someone told me once, he said, that the rational thing optimizes for the individual. The right thing optimizes for everyone in the room. He looked at the corridor, the closed cells, the white light, the warm composite walls beginning to cool. I've never been good at only being in the room I'm standing in. Vorket crouched down. An awkward posture for her physiology, clearly not something she did often. She went to his level anyway, the way you go to someone's level when what you're saying is too important to say from above them. The Union's classification of your species, she said quietly. Apex predators. Class 9 death world. Threat potential extreme. High aggression, territorial, survival focused. She paused. I've been trying to make sense of what I've watched for the last 40 minutes. And that classification dash, she stopped. It doesn't fit. It's accurate, Marcus said. Then explain to me how an apex predator ends up on a prison floor with someone else's child asleep on his shoulder after spending his one window of freedom fixing a reactor, managing a cell block, and getting himself hurt in the process. Marcus looked at the sleeping Preth child, at the complete, trusting vulnerability of exhausted sleep, the way she had curled against him in the deep instinctive way of young beings seeking the thing they've decided is safe. He thought about her hand in his, in the dark, when the lights went out, how she had held on, how she'd said still here back to him without hesitating. Because on a Class 9 death world, he said, the apex predator isn't the one who kills everything in the room. He paused. It's the one who decides who in the room is worth keeping alive, and then stays to make sure. Vorket looked at him for a long time. She stood up. Sub-Warden Drex. Drex stepped forward, the reactivation tool in hand. Schedule a full medical evaluation for the prisoner's shoulder and hand before the restraints go back on. She looked at Marcus steadily. And flag cell Viridian 9 for a formal case review. Flag cells 9 and 10 both. She paused. And contact the Union Juvenile Processing Office. The Preth minor in cell 8 is to be transferred to appropriate juvenile facilities within 72 hours. If they push back, tell them I'll be filing an administrative misconduct report and copying it to the Oversight Committee's Public Records Division. Drex blinked. Yes, Warden. And Drex. She didn't look away from Marcus. Pull every maintenance log for this station's emergency systems. Every single one. I want to know what else we've missed. She looked at Marcus one more time. I'm going to reinstate your restraints. I know. The commendation report I file won't change your sentence. I know. It will change something, she said. And the way she said it carried the specific weight of someone who has just decided to carry something new for a very long time. She straightened, turned to leave, and from cell 5, through the closed door, in the low, layered harmonic of a Carathian voice producing something it almost never produced. Warden. Vorket stopped. Grex requests a formal statement be entered into record, said Grex 7. Not the clicking operative voice. Something more deliberate. Prisoner Viridian 7 conducted himself in this corridor with what Carathian military tradition designates Karaveth. The last warmth. A pause. It is the highest honor Carathian culture awards. Cannot be given. It can only be recognized. Another pause. Grex recognizes it. Vorket turned slowly and looked at the closed door to cell 5. Then she looked at Marcus. He was looking at the floor, jaw set, with the expression of someone who doesn't know what to do with something and is trying very hard not to show that. The expression, she realized, of someone who gives everything to rooms full of people and has almost no practice receiving anything back. She filed that away too. Noted, she said to cell 5. It will be in the record. She walked away down the corridor, her footsteps measured and deliberate, carrying the weight of a recalibration she was only just beginning to understand the full size of. Chief Engineer Vasai submitted her incident report to the Union Oversight Committee 48 hours after the Kethara incident. It was a technical document. Detailed, precise, formatted to Union Engineering Standards Protocol 7 with every data point correctly sourced and verified. The kind of report that gets read by safety engineers and filed in databases and never makes it past the second tier of administrative review. Except the appendix. The appendix was not formatted to any union standard, because no union standard existed for what Vasai needed to say. It was 3 paragraphs, attached under the heading Witness Statement, Corridor Observations. She wrote, "When my team emerged from sublevel 4 into cell block Viridian, we found one human being holding open a 4,000-kilogram emergency blast door with his body so that 11 engineers could pass through. He was bleeding. He was visibly in pain. He did not mention either. He told us we had 4 minutes and to run, and we ran." She wrote, "I have reviewed the station's internal sensor logs from the 90 minutes of the incident. Prisoner Viridian 7 had no restraints, no supervision, and no obligation of any kind. He had access to an emergency corridor that would have taken him to an external docking junction. He had a Category 7 cascade as cover. He had every reason to go." She wrote, "He managed a cell block containing some of the most dangerous individuals in the Union's custody without violence, without incident, and without losing a single one. He then positioned himself at a blast door and held it open with his body. When my youngest technician asked him how he'd pushed the door, he said, 'Someone had to. I have been in starship engineering for 19 years. I have never met anything like him. I am not sure the Union has adequate language for what I witnessed. I am submitting this statement because I think we should try to develop some." Vorket's report to the Union Oversight Committee ran to 47 pages. The first 46 were standard incident documentation. The last page had no template. She wrote, "The Union's xenobiological classification of Homo sapiens describes apex predators from a Class 9 death world. Threat potential extreme. This classification is not incorrect. But it is incomplete in a way that I now believe is dangerous not because it overestimates humans, but because it fundamentally misunderstands what makes them extraordinary. What I observed in cell block Viridian during the Kethara incident was not predation. A Carathian military operative who could have created chaos chose to provide tactical intelligence instead. 2 Veth Syndicate operatives who could have used their knowledge for leverage chose to give it freely. A Varesai enforcer serving 30 years chose to help rather than exploit. They made these choices because of what the human in that corridor was doing. Because something about the quality of his decision to stay, to help, to pay the cost himself changed what they decided to be. On Earth, they have a word for this. The word is guardian. It does not translate cleanly into standard galactic. Our closest equivalents refer to professional security functions or ownership-adjacent protection. Neither captures it. What I saw was a being who looked at a room full of people with no claim on him, some of whom had imprisoned him, some of whom were classified as threats to galactic society, one of whom was a child forgotten by our own administrative systems, and decided, without apparent conflict or expectation of reward, that all of them were his responsibility. Not because of law, not because of threat, not because of incentive, because he had decided. I have been in this work for 11 years. I have never seen anything like it. I submit that the Galactic Union has never seen anything like it. And I submit further that we should begin paying considerably more careful attention to a species that produces this as its response to a crisis. These people are not what we thought they were. They are something we don't have words for yet. I am recommending that we get some. 3 months after the Kethara incident, the Union Oversight Committee completed its review. Marcus Chen's sentence was not commuted. The law ran on facts. The facts of the Viridian Station incident had not changed. What changed was this. The Union Juvenile Processing Authority implemented new protocols requiring juvenile detainees to be transferred to appropriate facilities within 36 hours of intake, following a formal misconduct finding related to the case of one Preth minor. She was transferred to a Union-funded support facility on Harith Station and subsequently reunited with her parent after that parent's appeal review was expedited. A review that had sat in administrative queue for 4 months and was suddenly, under new procedural guidelines, processed in 11 days. On the day of her transfer, the Preth child was escorted through Cell Block Viridian on her way to the docking bay. The escort paused at Cell Viridian 7. She stood at the viewport for a long moment. Then she pressed her small, scale-plated hand against the glass. Marcus Chen, sitting at his table with his spine straight and his hands folded, looked up. He held her eyes for a moment, all 4 of them, steady and bright and no longer frightened, and then he pressed his own hand against the glass from the other side. Different sizes, different species, different worlds, same gesture. She left. He stayed. The station continued its business. Dask Mull, Varesi enforcer, had his case flagged for formal review. The review board, citing the incident report, Vorket's commendation, and a formal written statement from Grex 7, which no one in the facility had known Grex 7 was capable of producing, found a pattern that did not cleanly fit the profile of someone who would be the same threat at year 30 as he had been at year 1. His sentence was not reduced, but a notation was entered. The door to a future review was opened. The Veth pair appealed. Twice. The second appeal was still working through the Union's administrative machinery at the time of this account's compilation, which surprised no one who had ever encountered Veth pattern thinkers in a legal context. And in Cell Viridian 5, Grex 7 remained quiet. Not the quiet of someone biding time. A different quiet. The quiet of someone who has witnessed something that reorganized what they considered possible, and is still in the process of deciding what to do with that. Vorket submitted her formal request for a comprehensive review of humanity's species classification on a Tuesday. The first submission was denied. She resubmitted with 47 pages of documentation, 11 engineering witness statements, a formal commendation record, a written statement from a Varesi enforcer in Cell Viridian 9, and a single handwritten line from Cell Viridian 5. I have fought many things in many corridors. I have never stood in the presence of Karaveth before. You should look more carefully at what you think you know. Prisoner Viridian 5. The review was approved. And in Cell Viridian 7, on the morning the approval notification came through, Marcus Chen was eating breakfast. Seated at his table, spine straight, both hands visible, working through the nutrient ration with the systematic efficiency the warden had once found simultaneously reassuring and deeply unsettling. His restraint bracers were active. Amber pulse, steady and calm. His shoulder had healed in 11 days, faster than the Union medical officer had projected, a fact she had entered into his file with the careful notation that human soft tissue recovery rates under adequate nutrition exceeded Union baseline projections by a factor that required updating the relevant medical protocols. He ate his breakfast and listened to the station hum around him. 67 beings, beginning another day in a facility that existed to contain what the galaxy couldn't manage, going about the ordinary business of surviving. The quality of his stillness had not changed. It was still the stillness of something that had decided, for reasons entirely its own, that noise would be beneath it. But Vorket, passing the observation window on her morning rounds, had learned to see what lived underneath it now. The stillness of someone who had looked at a room full of people with no claim on him and decided they were his responsibility, who would, in all probability, make the same decision again. She paused at the window. Below, without looking up, Marcus Chen stilled his hands on the table for a moment. A small acknowledgement, barely visible, the kind that doesn't ask for anything in return. She continued her rounds. Somewhere in the Union's Xeno-Relations Division, a committee was drafting language for something they didn't yet have words for. The work of understanding always begins with admitting that what you thought you knew was only where you started. And on a Class 9 death world 600 light-years away, 8 billion people went about their lives, building things, breaking things, arguing, creating, enduring, entirely unaware that a man sitting in a prison cell on a station between two dead moons had just changed, in some small and irreversible way, what the galaxy understood about what it meant to be human. Not because he was the strongest thing in the room, because he was the one who stayed. Blacksite Kethara Incident Report, Case Ref. KTH 7741-9. Status: closed. Human assessment: ongoing. Classification review: in progress.